Hi everyone, and welcome to How the Pod, the place where we pick the brains of changemakers in tech and society. Today we have the notorious Swedish tech profile Annika Lidne, the founder of Dramatify. And together with her, we're going to have a conversation about how to bootstrap your startup, what the tech industry works like, and many other things. So this episode is in partnership with progressdata.io, a research-based tool for HR managers to measure what matters when it comes to gender and diversity, pay gap, and creating parity reports with actionable improvement suggestions. That's progressdata.io. So Annika, I'm so happy to have you here. You've started a company called Dramatify. And I've also known you for many years with Geek Girl Meetup and so on. Would you want to tell me a bit about your company and what you do there?
Yeah, first, thank you for having me. Dramatify is a production management platform in the cloud. So it's a SaaS platform for scripted video, TV, drama, commercials, corporate video, and so on. And we actually don't handle any video. So it's just the planning and management, scripting, and so on.
And how did you come to do this?
Rather, I would say it's a long story. When I was born, I was sort of a bet in the studio if I would become, if I was to be born before or after season end, in a big national TV show. And then I grew up at Swedish national TV. I worked there as a kid. I think I sort of did speaker for like 200 hours of animation before age 13. And then after high school, I thought that now I would have like the last, summer holiday as a kid and before sort of going into the workforce. And that lasted 2 days exactly before my mom came home and said, we need a secretary right now. So that was my 2 days of summer holiday. But then I started to work there as a sort of a temp in different departments. And then I left for journalist school. And kept more in touch with, I did directed commercials and screenwriting for drama and amongst other things. And then I actually, after a stint of both funding companies and working as a CEO for other companies, I came back to film because a friend asked me to do the product placement for 6 Swedish crime noir films. And realized that nothing had happened on the technology and production management side for ever. And then I thought, with my internet background and so on, that we could really do some good here, and especially when it comes to the team. Most products on the market still, I would say, is actually focused on the single creator or one role in the production team, whereas we are looking at to help the team with automating the job as much as possible.
Oh, that's amazing. And it's like a lot of industries that have had this like legacy. They're doing amazing work, but they just haven't caught up with.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, if you look at film and TV, I mean, they can make us, travel to distant star systems or, bring dragons to life, but still they can't sort of manage their paperwork in a modern way. So it's still, a lot of print, a lot of email, a lot of single user desktop programs and so on. So that's what we are automating right now.
That's fascinating. And did you do like a strategic analyze before you went into the market and stuff like that? Or were you...
Not really. The first idea actually was more to make a sort of script timeline tool. I actually met my co-founder Annika Lidne at Geek Girl Meetup. And we realized together that we were like, nobody of us had worked with iPads, and we were not like graphic design superstars, as it is a super complex UX product. And we also realized that if we was going to make any money, it needed to be so expensive, so nobody would buy it anyway. And then I started to talk to friends in the industry, and we started to sort of solve bits. The easiest part first, like call sheet distribution and so on, and realized step by step that what everybody told us is that they needed one place for everything. And that I can say is both like a great benefit, because you can lock in your customers for a long time. On the other hand, for investors, it can be a difficult concept, because you have this minimal viable product, and that has often been interpreted as, do very little and the customers will come. And that's true in some instances, but in other, when it comes to more complex industries, the customers won't come until you have a very attractive alternative that sort of makes it really irresistible. And then that can mean that you need to build a lot of stuff.
And so which path have you chosen to go, and how did you sell it into investors?
We have basically just had industry investors, so we have mostly built through corporate
Partnerships?
fees. Yeah, corporate partnerships and innovation grants.
Oh,
so we have a very small investor cadre.
Yeah, because I remember I met you up in the attic of like Krona a few years ago, or maybe I just met Angelica. And no, but you were there as well.
Yeah.
You were like sitting in a sofa in the attic working.
Yeah.
And it was just like, because you've been doing this for a few years now, right?
Yeah, we have done it more or less full time for close to 5 years, I think.
And that's phenomenal. I mean, that you only have one investor and you're like profitable.
We have several investors, but it's not large sums. But most of it has been self-funded, soft grants, and especially industry investors, corporate investors that don't actually have any equity, so they pay us to develop features for them that are then rolled into the platform and rolled out for all customers.
That's fascinating. And how, because usually when you have a startup, you're kind of afraid of customizing for a specific customer.
Yes, I agree. Basically, it's like we are very careful with what kind of feature we say yes to. So in general, we have two categories: general features that can be used by everyone. And thankfully, I mean, the way you do film and TV production is quite universal. You have some legal differences between continents, but in general, it was the similar. And then we can also build specific like API and export solutions. But also there we try to be as universal as possible. So this spring, for instance, we're going to build integration for sending information from Dramatify to a broadcaster. But then we do that in a sort of standard format for the industry, so others can sort of hook into it as well.
And what would be a broadcaster in your area of, or like in your domain of work?
A broadcaster is national TV, so SVT in Sweden, while in Finland, that kind of broadcaster. Cool. Or CNN or NBC, that's broadcasters. So very specific companies. Yeah, so very specific companies.
That's cool. That's amazing. That's so exciting. And like, how have you? Because like bootstrapping something from the beginning is difficult, right? Whether you're just in the beginning or whether you're like more experienced, as in your case, because you've been around. I remember when I came into the tech industry and you were like, I was like, wow, Annika, she knows like everything. And it's still till this day. I feel
Thank
like,
you.
Annika, like go ask her, but like formulate your questions well, because you don't want to show up and like not have your questions in order. How have you bootstrapped at an experienced level? I mean, of course, you had governmental grants, but in the
Yeah.
beginning, how?
Yeah, I mean, the government grants is like 30,000 euros, so that's like not much, but it's helpful in the start. I would say what we have worked a lot also with external consulting jobs separately. So I have mine, and Angelica have hers. And sort of having a stretch of a couple of months when we work with other things, and then we come back and work with Dramatify sort of in the start. And also, I would say the investment market have changed a lot in the last 10 years, I would say. When I started working with startups about 10 plus years ago, then you had the government grants, which is usually up to maybe 30k euros. And then you could quite easily, especially when the startup scene sort of started going after the 2008 crash, you could quite easily get, smaller investments of 100,000 euros or up to maybe 500,000 euros. And were a lot of smaller or VCs rather going into these early startup investments. And especially with Dave McClure running 500 startups, which sort of set the trend of small and early investments. That has changed a lot, I would say, the last 3, 4, 5 years or something. And the stakes have gotten higher, and the gap of between the very small early funding and the regular rounds are getting larger, which is a problem. So I would say up to maybe 50,000 euros, that's easy to get. And then you have today, I would say, for most companies, you have a gap until maybe 500 or 700,000 euros. So you sort of lack those early, 100, 200,000 investments. And of course you can patch it together with smaller, but it's getting more difficult to get that, which means also that you have to set up your business plan and your goals and your investments in a different way.
Do you have any moments and points in time of your startup that radically changed your course?
Yes, I would say we got to know the innovation director of Yle, which is the Finnish public broadcaster, and they had an acute need for a specific feature set for live and studio multi-camera productions. And they had been looking for like 10 years for the ultimate rundown format, which they hadn't found. So they asked, could you build it for us? And that sort of broadened our entire offering. So we started, because I come from drama and commercial, so that's what we knew and where we had the contacts and what we built. And then they added sort of this other part, which also made that from being, I would say, more of a single production tool, we are today towards a more internet solution for production management. So we offer a multi-genre tool rather than just a per production drama tool.
That's fascinating. So it's anyone working on a production, basically, like project managers, producers.
Yes, wardrobe, makeup, scenography, and so on. I would say the only thing we don't cover today is reality shows, because they have quite a very different feature set, but we're going there. Also, if you have like, two guys with a camera in the jungle, we are not obviously not the tool for it.
Yeah. So how did people manage this? Because I could imagine, I mean, I've worked
paper, email, Dropbox, Google Sheet, Google Docs. Yeah, things all over. No coordination, no automatization.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean the entertainment industry is now actually by The Economist a year ago was called the new oil, because the entertainment industry is today having the same turnover as the oil industry, and especially I would say here in Sweden, entertainment is often looked at as a kind of the poor beggar cultural sector, and that has been a sort of a problem for us investor wise, because investors don't really understand that this is a big international industry, because they know too little about it. So that has pushed us to be better in presenting the business opportunity and not taking for granted that people know about it.
So being a few years into your own company, you're probably being able to pay your own salary. What would you say are the most important things that you've learned?
I would say I've learned that I should have set up the company differently to start with. And maybe not going into this industry at all in some respect, but taking a stronger strategic view. And I would say when you generate business ideas today, you have to think about what is your personal goal and how do you want to run your life. So do you want to be a lifestyle entrepreneur, or do you want to build a unicorn? You also have to set up the business idea compared to that. And from that, I mean that you have to have a research more of the very particular need, and lots of billions in potential sales, and really document it. And I'm thinking especially about Johan Attby, who's the founder of Fishbrain, which is a community for anglers. And I mean, he wasn't to start with liked fishing or angling particular, but his research was that this was the hobby with the largest sort of buying gear and spending in the entire sort of leisure industry. So that was where that analysis came from. Also, you have to think about the speed of adoption. And film and TV, for instance, it's been slow. On the other hand, that makes it easier to bootstrap. So if you're going into, e-scooters, you have to have a huge investment backing you, because the development is so fast, and you need to be really out there with advertising to get the customers. So it's very different how you build your company and what you want to build. So I think that today, especially, the competition is much harder, and you need to be very, very sure of what your goal is and how you're going to get there, depending on the business idea that you choose.
And were you aware of is this a lifestyle or is this a unicorn business as you went in?
Yes, but I underestimated, I would say, the investor reaction to a business-to-business company. So it's been easier, I would say, in Sweden in general to get large investments for business to consumers. That's not always true in abroad. There's been a turn from business to consumer to business, but I think I underestimated the willingness to invest in a company like ours. But we get there.
I am sure you will. Were there any specifics around the underestimation?
Yeah, I mean, you need to be. I mean, if you want to go in on a large investment, you need to show that you have a potential market of, I would say, at least $3 billion or euros.
And that's even in Sweden or
Yes.
internationally?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Swedish. I mean, there's not. I mean, not perhaps if you're getting small angel investments, but today, I mean, the Swedish and Nordic investors works on the same market as everybody else. So you need to show that. I mean, if you have any market below, a billion euros, you're out. Go home, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go big or go home.
Yeah.
And which category have you placed yourself in?
Well, we going our current pitch deck. We have I think our market is at 3.2 billion euros, if I remember correctly.
So you're going unicorn.
Well, we hope so. Yes.
You're aiming. That's good.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. And that is, of course, global, and that's excluding China. The rest of the world, as our industry is very international, and it's a lot of co-production and so on, where we can easier facilitate the production process. But you have to exclude China as a SaaS tool, because you need to, for instance, strip out Google Maps because that's banned. You have the Great Firewall of China, which slows all foreign services into Heinz ketchup, and there's other things we have looked at a lot on Chinese collaborations, but that's not so far not where we're going. Actually.
What about the Indian market? I'm thinking like Bollywood and that entire...
Indian market is great potential, but they have a problem in that they don't want to pay for software. Labor is so cheap, so they just throw like 50 more people onto it. So but I mean it, and also when it comes to film, not series, TV series or anything like that, but when it comes to film, about 80% of the Indian films are produced at a loss. So it's a huge interest in the internal market, but they don't really make any revenue, and they don't have any grants like we have in Europe, for instance.
And I was speaking with a friend yesterday about like doors. Has anyone opened up doors for you? And in what way? Like what was the result of that?
I would say our first investor, Mikael Werner, he's worked as a salesperson on the international market for I think close to 30 years. He knows everyone. And he had a company called Nonstop Sales, which he sold to Turner Broadcasting, which is CNN. And then he started his own sort of smaller business as to work with himself in a sort of semi-retirement. And he has really been this, when we're at the markets and fair internationally, he knows everyone and sort of, oh, you need to talk to Annika, or Annika, you need to talk to this person. So that's been really great because you can get to know people in a different way. But I also think that there's a lot of doors that people may open for you that you shouldn't go through because the opportunity is too small. So you spend a lot of time on people that are maybe very nice, but they don't give that massive opportunity. So it's easy to sort of scatter your time on people and opportunities that are simply too small for your business idea.
And what would you say are the things that we didn't learn at business school? Because I know that you sometimes do talks at schools.
Well, I had a very, very interesting lecture at KTH, the Royal School of Technology, on their business industry economy course, where they had this exercise where they should start a factory in Singapore, if I recall correctly. And I asked, why on earth do you start a factory in Singapore? You don't do that today. And they were quite surprised by that. So I think I ruined everything for the teacher. And then I had a lecture in basically startup funding and the different ways of soft money, non-equity corporate development, VCs, and the pros and cons of that. And they were like, they never even heard anything like that before. And for us in the startup business, that's like, yeah, that's how you do it. But it's not on the as far as I know, especially not when it comes to in this industrial economy, for instance.
And wasn't the thing also about the factory in China or Singapore?
Yeah, I mean, you don't. The Chinese obviously build factories, but why anybody in the Western world should build a factory in China? It's like you buy that kind of access, and you buy production. You don't build houses or buildings, or so. Yeah. So I mean, we have a completely different way of handling things today. I have a friend who she's a fellow equestrian, and she started this small little brand for horse rugs and blankets. And I mean, she can handle everything like on her spare time, and she has a developer or a factory in India doing all her things. So I mean, you can start big or small, but you don't build factories today unless that's your core service of providing factory space.
Yeah. So how do you work with networks? I know that you've started up a few networks of your own, and you're an excellent networker.
I think I've been becoming the last couple of years more and more of a hermit, I must admit, because it's very easy, especially in the startup sector, as well as when it comes to film and TV, where everybody loves big parties at fancy locations and a lot of champagne, that you spend your time going to events and mingling, and it doesn't really pay in new orders or investors or anything tangible for your business. So it's very easy to get caught up in this sort of startup scene and everyone, but it doesn't really pay off in the end. And yes, it's fantastic when you get to know people, but I think that, for instance, adding people on LinkedIn so you can work around their get their emails and email them directly. That might be a more valuable time than going to a startup mingle.
Yeah. And what happened to Cannes? You were going to go to Cannes.
Yes, it was virtual, so I didn't get to visit my favorite shoe store, so I'm crushed.
But you've been there with your company.
What?
But you've been there prior.
Yeah. I usually I have been some years. I've been there like 3 times a year. So in April it's MIP TV, and then in May it's the Cannes Film Festival, and in October it's MIPCom. But right now I'm actually skipping the film festival because it's more like party, and just going to the MIPCom conference. So that was virtual this year instead.
So going forward, what would be your key takeaways for remote teams in the era of Corona and making film?
Today, since so many people are relying on rather old school methods, it can get very hard to manage. So there, of course, Dramatify is one tool. I would say for most teams today, it has to do with more on the creative side, actually. You have to find stories and production ideas where you can produce in such a manner that you have a minimal team. So we saw, for instance, in Finland this spring, when they locked down the entire Helsinki area, you couldn't go out. So they did a show, live broadcast 4.5 hours a week, called Wiley Living Room. So they shot from people's living rooms, of different artists and so on. So their Dramatify was a big help. I just spoke to one of our investors today, where they are doing a new drama show coming, where they've taken a real historical event, and where they can set up basically everything in a studio, so they don't have to go out and meet people, and people can sort of be there and at home and try to isolate people as much as possible. So you can't really have the action movies or action series where you go around and have productions all over the place. So you have to see sort of creative ideas of how you can limit people's travels and how many people they spend in at a time.
So I'm thinking the next question is going to be or two questions. What would be your key takeaways for new entrepreneurs, maybe your first company? And then what would be the key takeaways for seasoned entrepreneurs going forward in this climate of 2020, 2021?
For new entrepreneurs, I should advise that you really think about your private situation to start with. What do you want to achieve? Is it a lifestyle company where you sit at home, or is it to become a unicorn? And I would say that going the VC route can be, especially in a volatile situation that we have right now, can be very risky, because even if you get like startup funding, you do an A round, unless you get sales really racketing up, then the VC firm may drop you after the A round. So that's always a risk, and maybe now more than ever. On the other hand, since we have the COVID situation, there's also a lot of business opportunities. We also have, a longer term challenge with climate and things like that. And I see a lot of excitement around food, for instance. But that's like super technical. So then you need to team up with, biologists and agricultural scientists and food, scientists and so on. So it's a different type of company to run. I also think there's a lot of opportunity in escapism. So games or environments or ideas around sort of getting away from the rather gloomy, claustrophobic situation at being at home. And for seasoned entrepreneurs, I think sort of scratch most what you know and think afresh. It's very easy to sort of get into the I know how to do this and continue like you have been before. So you need to be sort of reset yourself and really take a very crass and hard look at the world and opportunities.
What questions would you have people ask themselves going forward as an entrepreneur?
I think that people should ask, do they really have the stamina? I think that last 5-10 years, there's been a lot of buzz around entrepreneurship. And when we look at the US, for instance, you have more people sort of that usually go into the banking sector that's gone into startups because they thought that's where the glamour and the money is. But entrepreneurship always has and still is the sort of the marathon race. It's hard slog. And then you will always have like these stories of a company that get discovered and go big. Same thing that you have with film stars or models or anything like that. Those things always happen, but that's like the unusual case. And you also have to think about your home situation. and so on. On the other hand, I would say today, being employed is no longer the sort of safe option it was once, and the workforce is getting pressed harder. You have often less freedom. So entrepreneurship might be the case. And I think also if you have several legs, especially in the beginning, to stand on, you might, have a gig work, you might have a consulting gig or any other kind of income when you start. Then you can slog it out in a longer, and before you start getting a lot of investments and sort of burn through your cash before you really have started to get an MVP or get customers enough.
And do you have any specific tips for lifestyle entrepreneurs? Because we kind of focused in on unicorns, and if you were to speak to lifestyle entrepreneurs, what would that advice be?
I would say try to get as much passive income as possible. And with passive incomes, I mean, you may be able to rent out the room in your apartment or your house. You may be able to set up a simple, e-commerce, where you sort of have a passive income of, some boring inventory that still sells. Or you have, you can make a good living as a consultant. So sort of start to have a basis which you go from. And I feel often that lifestyle entrepreneurs can be a bit glamorized. You're the Instagram influencer who just go around in cool places and sort of take photos, and people really, or you do vlogging or whatever, and people really forget that it's maybe 16 hours a day. Yes, I mean myself. Yes, I can go off, during lunch and go horseback riding for 3 hours, but then I sort of take work until midnight. So yes, you can do that in a different way, but I still think that people often forget how much work it is to be an entrepreneur at all, regardless of the mode you do it in.
So true. Catherine, do you have any last questions that you're thinking about that you want to ask?
Hey, Annika. Super important point you make there, like to remind us all how much graft you need, how much stamina you need to become an entrepreneur and to really make it work. With the explosion of the influencer and the YouTube, kind of revolution to democratize content marketing, maybe it just looks so easy and glamorous, but it's a huge amount of work. As you say, many hours go into it. But the one thing I wanted to ask you beyond what we've already talked about, I was reminded of some clients of mine. They had their own company. It was 2 young women, and they had this fantastic idea. It was a tech idea. I won't share the details with the world, and I won't reveal their identities, but they had this idea which I thought would be really revolutionary. When they described it to me, it seemed like something that everybody would want to have, that would be universally useful. But they had only some initial investments, only smaller amounts, and they were trying desperately to get further funding, larger amounts, to grow, develop the idea further. And they had just come across this ceiling, the gap that you talked about, where you can't get over 50,000 euros investment, and the gap up to the next, like the 500,000, was so hard to break through. So what would you say to other entrepreneurs who are starting out, who are trying to break this gap, and who have either so far failed or had to stop and give up? Especially what you were saying about having multiple income sources.
Yes, I would firmly say that try to get a corporate partner or a corporation that sort of can help you fund this early, not perhaps towards equity, but as a true partner that you develop for. And corporations need this kind of development. Secondly, and everybody will hate me for this, is to get a male co-founder that you have as a figurehead, and because we see within the numbers that female-funded and mixed teams take somewhere between 7 to 10% of the invested funds in Sweden. The difference between the female funders and the mixed may vary over the years, but it doesn't go up. So your best chance is actually to get a male front figure, preferably young, handsome, and with an MBA exam. And we can also see this within the government-funded funding institutions, which is actually our tax-payer money, where the University of Luleå a couple of years ago did a study where the public investment managers had a horrible bias against women entrepreneurs, where we were thought to be less risk averse, didn't want to expand the same way as men. And when female teams are awarded funds, they are getting less than they asked for, compared to similar male teams. Whereas we see international surveys where women-led companies actually do better return on investment on the money. In most cases. So it's a problem there. And I would also like to sort of emphasize that this is a very important question, because women own very little in the world today. And in Sweden, women own far less than men do. And with a modern society, it's very difficult to sort of get rich from working. You need to have some kind of business or investments to actually get rich, so to speak. And to get rich may not be an end in itself, but it also fuels the next generation of entrepreneurs. So without a successful female entrepreneurs that can do an exit and invest in the next generation, we won't change this. And far too often, I think I come across women who are like, money doesn't matter, and everything should go to the sort of better social cause. And I promise you, if I see a social entrepreneur company or social startup, 9 out of 10 times it's female funders, and investors don't go for that. So you sort of get crass and get the money in, and don't be so bloody nice.
God, that is depressing. Solid, very solid advice, much needed advice, clearly. Oh God, what a depressing idea to have to get in a male model to fund your company, but if that's what it takes.
But I must say, I heard from male funders in Sweden who are over 40, and they have the same situation. So
they're not beautiful enough.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually spoke to an investor friend in Silicon Valley, and I said that I have joked with a plus 40 male entrepreneur that we should set up a sort of modeling agents for male fronts for startups. And he said, well, this isn't a joke, Annika, because he had investors coming back from Stockholm asking him if all startup funders are male, white, good-looking, and between 25 and 30. That was the only thing they encountered.
Annika, keeping it real. I mean, it is a sad and depressing reality. But on the other hand, like once you understand the rules of the game, I think you can kind of optimize for yourself. And seeing like, okay, if these are the rules of the game, how do we play it? Or do we want to play this game? And also like, and just the fact that a lot of like, I know that Vinnova is struggling with this because they don't distribute their funds equally or even accordance to the statistics or percentual division. So it is a harsh reality that one does need to take a look at. Otherwise, you're basically being delusional, and you don't want to be.
Yeah, and I also think that I mean, go abroad with your idea. Your idea might be more well received in the Philippines and Indonesia than in the Nordics, for instance. There's a greater appreciation and even reverence for entrepreneurs in Asia, for instance. I mean, here in Sweden, it's like, oh, you're probably a little crazy who aren't doing a sort of steady 9-to-5 job. Whereas in Asia, it's like, oh, are you the founder? It's like, whoa, you're up on a pedestal. So I mean, sort of find your market and don't limit yourself and just looking at the Nordics, for instance. I would also like to say that there are people out there who are fantastic at finding investor money, as well as writing applications for instance, Vinnova. So use them. Yes, you have to give them a share of the money, but it might be better and more time friendly to use them instead of sort of trying to do everything yourself.
And where would one find one of those? Is it
ask around? I would say they're out there. I mean, they're not super common, but if you get to know people, you can ask around and find them.
But are we talking the agencies or like consultants?
The consultants, yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I love speaking to you, Annika, because you always keep it real, and it's much easier to navigate the world after a good chat with you.
Thank you.
I think on that note, we need to start rounding off. So I want to say a big thank you to you for taking time and having this conversation with us.
Thank you for letting me participate.
All right. Have a good one. Take care.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. My friend Alexander Pärleros over at Framgångspodden, one of Sweden's largest podcasts, has now gathered several of the life-changing profiles that he interviews in his podcast, but now under a new roof called Framgångsakademin.se, where they provide longer and more practical courses. So go to Framgångsakademin.se if you want to change yourself, help yourself develop, and reach your goals.